Business confidence is low and everybody seems to have an opinion about what that means. So Sharon, does a low confidence reading necessarily mean we're in for a downturn?
Essentially, it depends. I suppose that's the answer that economists always give. But the context for the fall really does matter, as does the cause. So sometimes it doesn't really matter if businesses decide to keep a stiff upper lip. If the global financial crisis hits your economy, the economy's clearly going to slow. Other times, business confidence can be more of a cause, causing firms to defer their investment and employment intentions if they're not quite sure how things are going to pan out. We think that's the situation we're in at the moment.
Sure. So it's a bit more like, it was low, and on one reading sort of almost around 2008 levels. We know the economic data isn't that bad, but there are other times in the history of this survey, in what you'd call, say, maybe mid or cycles, where it has dropped away like this.
Yes, I think probably the most similar episode is in 2000, because that arguably also had a political component.
Sure, that was the famous winter of discontent.
Exactly. There was quite a bit of uncertainty about the policy direction. Firms expressed that in the survey, and growth did actually decelerate pretty markedly from 6% down to 1%. But of course, 6% was never going to be sustainable. The economy was rocketing out of the impacts of the Asian financial crisis. And we actually saw a monetary policy response as well. People actually thought the economy was going to go into a bit of a hole, but actually it all bounced back pretty quickly, actually.
Sure. So, the one difference there perhaps is that was sort of earlier in the cycle. We're in a bit of a late cycle, or at least it's been a long expansion by historic standards. Do you think there's a bit of people sort of looking over their shoulder thinking, well, we're due a downturn? I mean, we just can't quite handle growing for 9 years in a row.
Well, it is certainly true. The New Zealand economy tends to get hit by some sort of nasty shock, typically to our terms of trade, about every 10 years. But of course, that's not a rule. That's a historical pattern, and it doesn't necessarily
be nice if it didn't happen.
Have to happen. It would be lovely if it didn't happen. There are plenty of risks offshore, obviously. The trade war that's going on at the moment poses downside risks to China, and we are very, very exposed to China. So we're seeing a monetary and a fiscal easing over there. An optimist would say, well, that's going to help, and a pessimist would say, why are they feeling the need to do that? So I guess there is scope for some sort of shock to what has been a very, very favourable external environment for this economy.
Sure, so that may be affecting it, but all the attention seems to be on the government, the idea that the government has policies coming in, particularly employment law and some of their big policies on oil and gas, things like that. That's what we hear from some commentators that have spooked business. Do you think that holds up?
Well, we survey our frontline staff for what they are seeing in the economy, and what we are hearing from them are that businesses are quite concerned about industrial relations policy and where that may end up. Retailers are particularly concerned about the minimum wage increases. Tourism and agriculture are other sectors that are quite exposed to that. And then the overseas investment changes as well, that maybe that might have some unintended impacts too. So there are concerns about the policy direction, but there is a lot else going on. We should remember perhaps that firms tell us their single largest problem is difficulty finding skilled staff.
Sure.
And that falls into the nice to have category, though it still is a real problem.
That's an economic growth problem. Just also around the methodology, because there's been a lot of discussion about this. Sometimes people point to the survey and say, CEOs complaining again, the big businesses on Queen Street. It's not really like that, is it? I mean, it reflects the New Zealand economy a bit more. That there's a lot more small and medium business in the survey.
Yeah, 60% of the respondents have 20 or fewer employees, and we don't actually weight the responses by firm size, which actually means that smaller firms actually have a bigger say in the survey. So I would say it really is a survey of the coalface.
Sure, and probably quite regionally spread as well.
Yes, we have a good geographical spread over the economy.
So I just wonder if that means that when the government, for example, looks at this and thinks about strategy, it really is about getting out into the regions, getting out into the smaller parts of the economy and reassuring people, this is your people owning panel beaters shops and factories in small towns, that kind of thing.
Yes, well, we talk about the economy, but for a lot of small firms in particular, all that matters is their regional economy, and that can feel very different on the ground. We're seeing very different numbers in confidence, including consumer confidence, out of, say, Wellington versus Auckland at the moment. Yeah. And then the regions can be different again. So we do tend to apply a broad brush to our analysis necessarily, but it's certainly true that the situation is quite different on the ground around the country.
That's great, Sharon. We'll leave it there. Thanks for that.
Thank you.